Yo, everybody. Welcome to Off Panel, a weekly interview podcast about all things comics. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the woman behind the long-running comic site, The Beat. It's Heidi MacDonald. Thanks for coming on, Heidi.
Hey, David. Thanks for having me. It's good to be back.
So it's the week after New York Comic Con, and I want to talk about it. I feel like, I don't know if this is just a me thing because I didn't go to it, but it feels like New York Comic Con is already like 500 years ago.
I was going to say this is something that I've noticed, and we noticed it at the Beat also. I mean, I've been doing the Beat covering San Diego Comic-Con and New York Comic-Con. Well, New York since it began, San Diego since the Beat began, so 14 years. And, in the olden days, you could run stories about the con for weeks afterwards, and sites often did. Even CBR and Newsarama, they would run like stories from San Diego for a month afterwards. And, apparently people were actually interested in reading these. However, now, honestly, by Wednesday, everyone is over it.
Mm-hmm.
And, which is sad because I didn't put up my cosplay gallery yet. And, it's very hard. Which makes it really difficult for those of us who go to the show because you just have to take a day off to decompress. And, to add another day of feverishly, writing and editing and getting everything up is really difficult. But that's kind of where we're at right now. So, yeah, nobody gives a crap more than, a few hours afterwards, really.
Yeah, I kind of feel like this is like an overall societal thing where it's like the news cycle is 24 hours at max. And then once you kind of escape that window, it's hard to capture people's attention, especially with New York Comic Con to a certain degree or like cons of that sort, because so much of it is based on like, this is an announcement, here's the response to it, and that's the entire story until it comes out. And I don't know, that's kind of a tough cycle to deal with if you're anything, let alone comics.
Right. It is definitely. And interestingly, I feel like this is I feel like comics got a little pass from this in some ways. I mean, I would compare San Diego Comic-Con to the biggest events like Super Bowl or the Oscars,
Sure.
and those are the only ones that I can even think of that are roughly comparable. And the fact that people would read coverage afterwards, I think, was the fact that there was no coverage. Whereas, the Super Bowl, there's a few stories the day after, but then it's over. It's over by Tuesday.
That's true.
It really, except for unless it's your city, So I think that there always was. I think maybe the fever pitch about these events has increased, or the fever pitch around San Diego has increased, so that now we have that, now we have that kind of all-consuming interest in these things beforehand, so it dies off a lot quicker. So of course the media is partly to blame, or the proliferation of media, but it's also just kind of how the higher the anticipation, the quicker you forget about it.
Yeah. I do want to kind of recap some of it because I am always counterintuitive to what you would expect people to do. It's over. Let's talk about it.
Right.
Like New York Comic Con, like how was it? I know you were there. I know you had the full Beat team. It's last time I went to it, I think it was like 2014, and it seems like it's only gotten increasingly overwhelming. How was it this year?
It varies. It varies by year. And there like it gets super crowded, and then they kind of got that under control. And then there was another year where it got insanely crowded again, and then they really got it under control when they had the RFID badges. So I think really everybody jokes about San Diego being survival, but it's really survival in the mental fitness and but endurance. But New York Comic Con has both of those, but it really also has a physical, survival, just in terms of it being so crowded, and you're just constantly getting whacked and smacked with stuff, and that is, that is a part of the New Yorker way, I guess. It's like you're always getting on crowded subways and stuff, unless you're working at home like me. Yay. So the crowds were. It was very crowded. The first three things, I like to eavesdrop, and the first three things I heard as I walked in was some guy saying, now the claustrophobia begins.
Ugh.
And then the second thing was, it's so crowded. And then the third was, oh no, are they free? And So those are really the things that people are concerned with, and so it wasn't death defying. I didn't have panic attacks. I mean, I don't get panic attacks in crowds, but normally, but I do get like I need to get away from this, and so that's just the physical proximity issue for me and a lot of people at New York Comic Con is really the biggest question, and then the other thing, of course, is the bathrooms, and I've
Yeah.
written about this. I've spoken about it. I've tweeted about it. But it really, what hotel rooms are to San Diego, bathrooms are to New York. I mean, period.
Hmm.
It's a source of constant anxiety. Although once you get a hotel at San Diego, you're not anxious anymore. Whereas with the bathroom anxiety, it's ongoing and continuous. But they really, there were lines of 40 minutes for women. The best place in New York Comic Con is the press room. I really did spend almost all my time up there, but I was working. So yeah, and everybody who I like comes through there pretty much. So um, it's a good place to hang out. They have a very small bathroom. There's a big celebrity potty in the back, and like that was kind of a little have and have not about that. Probably it's got 10 stalls, and
Hmm.
it's really awesome. And there's no waiting, but they're not allowed in there because apparently if you see a celebrity tinkle, you'll write about it on TMZ. So I hear that. I get it. I get it. So yeah, and a lot more offsites this year. I mean, which they have to do. They're continuing with the offsites. I think as I always say, I often say things on podcasts that I won't write down. But I did allude to this, and the main thing about New York Comic Con really is that its parent company, Reed, Reed Pop is a division of Reed, and they are very profit minded. And it is very expensive to put on New York Comic Con.
Hmm.
Wi-Fi alone costs $100,000. All right, so which was sponsored. It was sponsored by Wreck-It Ralph, so that's a nice buy by Disney.
Yeah,
Uh,
seriously.
right, but there will never be things that are, the things are always done to maximize profit,
Hmm.
and that eventually, there's just some things that really are annoying because of that, and I get more and more annoyed as time goes by with them. So, and so do some other people. So,
Yeah, yeah. I do think it's fun. I actually have a celebrity bathroom experience story, which is probably should. I'm not TMZ, but I did accidentally tell a really embarrassing story through a stall to somebody who I thought was my friend, but it was
oh,
actually Sean Patrick Flannery.
oh dear.
And then when he came out, he started laughing at me, and I was like, "Oh shit! Oh, I gotta go." And then I went outside. This was at Emerald City Comic Con, and I waited outside the entrance to the bathroom. And he walked by, and he turned, and he looked at me, and he started
Uh-oh.
laughing again. And I was like, "God damn it! Now Sean Patrick Flannery thinks I'm a moron." No, stop it,
Right,
Boondock
right,
Saint. Um,
right, right, right.
Anyways, no, I do think it's a really interesting con because it is so overwhelming. And then the other thing about it is like you think about Javits Center, you think about it being like, oh, it's just another convention center, but it's also like not really close to things. And I feel
Right,
like that's kind of a problem to a certain degree too. But I've never been to San Diego. It might be the same thing.
right. That it's not about comics?
No, no, it's not really close to other like spatially not really close to many things because like
Oh, look, yeah. Well, Javits has for years been isolated from other things. It was, purposely put in this the butt end of New York because it was the only place they had that they could put anything. And so when it was put up, which is I guess in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s, it was very isolated. There was literally nothing. I mean, you would literally have to walk all the way uh to Ninth Avenue to get food,
hmm.
and that's a two long bleak avenues, which is really nothing. But New Yorkers like to complain. Well, I mean, we're used to having everything in one block.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
just used to having it right in hand. But now this area is being developed into probably what's going to end up being one of the flashiest most modern, dazzling areas in New York. And
Interesting.
so, yeah, the Hudson Yards development, since you haven't been in a while, it's completely changed.
Mm.
Where there was just tufts of grass and garbage before are now big, giant, beautiful modern skyscrapers. And so that's continuing. So, They said that I talked to Mike Armstrong. He said this in several interviews that there's an expansion going on to the Javits, but that won't be finished till 2021. Now,
Mm-hmm.
meanwhile, all these skyscrapers are going to be open next year. So, private money versus government money, yes. They should have outsourced it and be done very quickly, but it's taking years and years to put this up. And in the meantime, probably even next year. I mean, already there's food that's a lot closer than 2 blocks away.
That's
I
good.
mean the whole area has really become vibrant. And as to your point about San Diego, same thing there. Really, I think that in earlier societies, the docks were a bad place. And there's tons of on the waterfront, tons of songs. There's plenty of popular culture and stories that reinforce this. Sweeney Todd, like if you wanted to go get murdered or assaulted, you go to the docks, you go to the
Yeah.
waterfront because all the goods had to come in through the water. And the men who worked on the docks, the sailors were the rough trade,
Mm-hmm.
so these were bad, dangerous places. And you'll see as I travel this great nation of ours, you'll see the changeover from water access being dangerous to being the highest perk that you could have,
Right.
So same thing with San Diego, where they put the convention center then was, I mean, it was the harbor. It was a nice little harbor. It wasn't like a dangerous, place full of, you know, pirates.
Right.
However, if you go south from San Diego has a lot of homeless people now, a terrible homeless problem. And it actually does get a lot rougher if you head south from the convention center.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so that's part of the reason, Heidi, I'm an amateur. I did not study this. This is my amateur opinion.
Right. Looking at your website, it's kind of amazing all the different things you covered, and I know you had the whole beat team crushing it there. But one thing I'm always curious about when you're like a site like yours, how do you decide what to cover? Is it just like get to as much as you possibly can, or is there a strategy behind it? What is it?
Yes, well, we do strategize, and we have a whole Slack where we plan things, and in the previous years it would be a Google group. I mean, Facebook groups. I mean, as the technology evolves, our planning method evolves. There's some basics that are going to be newsworthy, like the Cup of Joe panel or the
Right.
Marvel's next big thing or Meet the Publishers. Marvel and DC have these are the panels where we're going to break news panels. So obviously you want to get those covered. And then after that, honestly, one of my mottos or mantras for the beat is that you should write what you're passionate about. And I
Sure.
encourage my writers to do that as well, because I find that they will write better when they write about things they care about. So I had a really fantastic team this year, and they were, very interested in issues of representation and diversity. Yeah, I had very, very few white men on my team this year, or straight white men, I should say. And I mean, I will say that was a plan, but it's just kind of how it worked out. But it was great, and I really enjoyed getting different viewpoints. So people, and not even, I always say, you don't have to cover, just if you're a woman, you don't have to cover all the women in comics panels. So, but I want to have different, diverse viewpoints covering all this stuff. So it's kind of just like I will pick things that I like, and the team will kind of pick from those, but then they'll all have their own ideas,
Yeah.
about what they want to do. And like some people are really into Netflix, I want to cover that. Some people are really into Cartoon Network, I want to cover that. And some people, I honestly, it's really not a great secret. I just try to pick as smart and diverse a group of writers as I can, and I let them cover things that they're interested in, and it works out fairly well.
Yeah, that's great. So now that we have a little separation from the con, and you may have, because when you're in it, it's kind of hard to even see what's going on in the totality. Like, for example, a few years ago when they announced Young Animal at Emerald City Comic Con, I was there. I had no idea that happened because I was
Mhm.
at the con. But now that you have some distance, like, what are a couple of favorite announcements from the con? Is there anything that stands out to you?
Well, I think we'd all been waiting for the shoe to drop on Bendis's imprint. So I think with Wonder Comics, I think that was, I mean, we kind of been waiting for it, but that was certainly newsworthy.
Sure.
And the other one was Humanoids, and I didn't see that one coming until the week before.
Well,
Whereas
they were clearly building to something. I just didn't know what it was. Either that or they were just being really aggressive and hiring people like John Cassaday and Mark Waid to do something.
yeah, but that just started. That was only started a couple weeks ago.
Right.
I mean, I guess I had sort of been noticing that they were ramping up. Just let me throw in here. Let me see. I've been to uh, well, counting Diversity Comic Con, I guess I've been to 14 cons so far this year, or shows or events. Some of them
That's
are local. Yeah.
that's a lot.
It is a lot, but not even by standards. You know, that's kind of typical nowadays.
Hmm.
And I still have one definitely, and possibly two more. So, you know, I go to a lot of shows and I see how these things roll out quite a bit. And you know, as I was doing this, I got to see kind of humanoids. Like I was sort of like, huh, you know. I mean, I filed it away though. I mean, I can't say I expected them to suddenly announce a new superhero line, you know.
Hmm.
But I would say that one kind of caught people by surprise, and also, but I think it was all a good surprise. I think the people that they picked were really great, and so you know, we'll see. I mean, I think a new superhero line of periodicals is about, you know, the worst thing you could possibly uh, sell right now. That'd be like, um, you know, like selling futons. You know, futon store, which maybe you won't get, but anyway, yeah. Anyway, it's like all these things we had in the 90s, like new superhero lines. You know, get started on that right away, humanoids. But, you know, you got a good crew, so have fun doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it is like really tough sledding to kind of break into that because you even look at Valiant, and Valiant has been trying to do it's. I kind of feel like they've been trying to break in since they came back.
Right.
And they, you know, I think that they've been trying really hard and they've been putting in some great efforts, but it's still tough. And then humanoids, I am really interested in humanoids, and there's two things that I really like about it. Obviously the crew, the fact that they have John Cassidy and Mark Waid and Kwanzaa and Carla Speed McNeil and God, Yannick Paquette. Like
Yeah.
that's
And Cheryl, you know, Cheryl Lynn Eaton. I love her.
yeah,
I love
yeah. I
that.
mean,
She's one of my favorite people, so I'm really glad to see her get a break.
the people that they have behind it, like from an architecture standpoint, is incredible. And I also like the fact that they're not running so deep from the start. They're launching with, I think, 3 ongoings and then some minis around it. And I think going small is a smart move so you don't overwhelm the market and you can start getting people to buy in. But it's just tough. There's so many publishers right now, and
Right.
it's kind
Yeah.
of hard to break in.
Right. Well, you know, I remember when we talked, was it a year ago?
Yeah,
Was it
last
last year?
September.
Only a year ago, Jeepus. But you know, I remember, you know, people kept saying, "Whoa, Heidi's really calling it like it is," and you know, honestly, I don't remember what I said. It's probably just typical things that I say, you know, when people I'm standing in the bar talking, and but I will say since then, uh, I'm sure I was bagging on the periodical last time.
Yeah,
Okay.
you were definitely foreseeing the death of the periodical.
Right. Well, I've been foreseeing that for 20 years. So,
Yeah.
you know, I will say I am like the guy or the woman on the soapbox railing, you know, shaking her fist at the heavens. So, but it's becoming, it's not going to die. It's just, it's going to become like the record album, you
Hmm.
know, and then maybe someday it'll come back. But I think there's a couple things about the comics industry right now. One of them is that it's still in expansion mode. And even though the sales are not expanding, in fact, they're very flat, but it's absolutely still in expansion mode. You know, humanoids is a big investment from that. Um, you know, other companies are still going strong. You know, Aftershock, a lot of people said Aftershock, well, you know, didn't give them this long, but they're still there. You know, Lion Forge, which, you know, disclaimer is owned by, they own the Beat now.
Hmm.
But they are still going strong with their expansion plans. In fact, they have just getting started. And you know, various smaller companies that like Scout and Vault, you know, Valiant. I mean, they went through a big shake up earlier
Big
in the year,
time. Hmm.
big time, and they're still at it, you know. And so, you know, it does it. We're seeing new lines in books also. The hiring, you know, they've been hiring people in traditional publishers as well. You know, Gina Gagliano went to Random House to start her new line. Um,
Yeah, I'm really excited to see
and
what that's going to end up being.
oh yeah, I mean, yeah, that's huge. And what is it?
There
The
was
company,
what's his face? The
Chris
Duffy?
Duffy.
Yeah,
Yes, yes, yes. And I can't remember the name of the
Workman.
company. Yeah, Workman. Right. So Workman just hired Chris Duffy to do more of that. So you know, we are seeing no sign of a slowdown. So this and this comes as even while every we have these diversity in comics idiots saying the industry is dying, which is bullshit. But but the numbers aren't soaring. I mean they really aren't.
There's a
And
huge difference between not soaring and dying, though.
absolutely, absolutely. But I'm also saying that all of this investment in the comics industry is not reflected in sales at this point.
Right. Well,
Like,
I think it's like especially on the book market when you look at not only Gina's thing with the Random House children's books stuff, and then also Abrams is launching Megascope, which I think is kind of
right.
interesting, and then there's
Well,
also I actually think like there's two things this year that I think are like the weirdest moves in reflection of each other. Like I loved the fact that DC Ink and Zoom are going to happen, and then the fact that Marvel like sold off their children's stuff to IDW effectively. Like those two
mhm,
moves are such bizarre mirror images of each other in like the weirdest way. Like one is like, okay, we're moving towards where the industry is going, and the other one is like, okay, this is too tough. Who understands children? Let's move on. And
right.
it's like, I don't know. I feel like DC with its variety of imprints is moving towards where the industry is headed and the medium
Mhm.
is headed. And Marvel with that move is burying their head in the sand and we're just like, whatever, we do things the way that we do them and they're gonna like it. And I find it completely perplexing.
Right, right. Well, I mean, I don't think either company is in the best position they've ever been,
No.
to be honest. And DC, well, I mean, the other big story that came out of New York Comic Con was the BarCon story of just
Black
everybody
Label.
talking about Black Label and the fallout from, Batman's Dingus and just how interior and inside Warner Brothers, Batman's Dingus didn't go over very well, and uh, you know, and this says you see her all different versions of it, but but it's pretty clear that Black Label. I mean, even Jim Lee and Dan DiDio said in interviews that, oh yeah, we're looking at Black Label now, and we're taking a look at that, and obviously they didn't say that because that's, they wanted to say that. They,
Right.
like last month, they were a full steam ahead on this adult graphic novel line. So obviously something changed there. And I'm hearing that a lot of stuff is happening inside DC and, just who will live, who will die. It's Game of Thrones there, really, and it's also, now you have this three-headed monster at DC Comics of Brian Bendis, Scott Snyder, and Tom King, who are
Mm-hmm.
their most valuable properties. And so I like all three of those people. So I'm trying, but let's really look at the videotape here. I'm not sure that Bendis is going to have the impact at DC that he did at Marvel.
No, I mean, I don't think. I just don't think Bendis is at a place where he has as much heat as he did when he was coming up because he was new and fresh then. And the funny thing though is I actually think his DC stuff has been good so far, and I think Wonder Comics looks like it has a lot of potential.
Yeah, it looks solid.
Yeah, and so, but the funny thing is it's like I think for a long time at Marvel, to a certain degree, I like a lot of his stuff. I don't like some of his stuff at Marvel. I think that he was skating by on name almost more
Hmm.
than he was on the quality of his work. And now I think it's almost flipped, where it's like his name is less than his quality of his work, which is
Hmm.
kind of a bizarre position to be in.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know that three-headed monster is interesting because I don't know. I don't know. Like talking to creators, I don't know how much like a lot of times like the biggest writers even move the needle for them anymore, and I
Hmm.
don't know how much they. I certainly don't know how much they move the needle in like the book market or I mean look at the Walmart stuff that they're doing. Like I don't know if like Greg Capullo and Brian Azzarello doing a Swamp Thing comic is going to super move the needle for a Halloween special starring Swamp Thing. I don't know.
Right. Especially if people have to go to Walmart to find it. Yeah, and but let's really, uh, there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff that's been going on, and one of them that hasn't gotten as much, public play, I guess, because it is not public, is that the DC Retailers Forum has shut down comments,
Mm,
and all the really interesting conversations happen on these retailer forums where obviously the press is not allowed, and quite rightfully so.
that's a
Um,
pretty bad forum if you can't have comments. It's a
right,
really useless
right.
forum.
Right. So it started with Walmart. I mean, people were just freaking out over the Walmart stuff, which I thought was a little, really stupid, to be honest. And
I
I told
agree.
all the retailers I know that. But then, just recently, they shut down the comments. And I heard informally that maybe this had something to do with Heroes in Crisis, which, if your listeners don't know, is kind of the big book for the second half of 2018, written by Tom King, and it is the return of the crisis.
Hmm.
You know, like the aughts were the crisis era. We had what did we? I lose track. What we had? We had Identity Crisis, which really kicked things off. We had the return of the Infinite Crisis,
And
and
then there was
then
Final
we had
Crisis.
Final Crisis, and so we had lots of crises, and this really reflected the internal things that were going on at DC Comics at the time. I definitely crisis inside, crisis outside.
Hmm.
And so now the crisis is back. And, somebody at Comic-Con, New York Comic-Con, told me that Metal Knights was originally supposed to be called Dark Crisis.
Oh my God.
Right. And so anyway, clearly, and guess what? In the aughts, the crisis worked really well.
Right.
They sold gangbusters. They were real needle movers, trendsetters, all that. So Heroes in Crisis has sold well, but apparently it hasn't sold as well as it was projected to sell. And I think some retailers are a little skeptical about it, I guess. And to me, I think maiming and killing superheroes just isn't, we've been there and we've done that. I think people are just done with this. I
Yeah.
think they're really done. And, maybe one of the reasons why kids comics are, they are taking off. And this is where the real growth is right now, is that in the book market, kids graphic novels are one of the fastest growing categories.
Hmm.
And maybe the reason is that children are not on the internet all the time, reading websites about comics. You know?
Or commenting about them on Twitter.
Yes, right. Well, they might be on watching YouTube,
Right.
because kids do that. But they're not jaded, so they're like, when they see, a new Dog Man book, they just kind of read it and enjoy it, as opposed to this endless activity that we have around comics as a hobby. So I mean, circling back to something you brought up earlier, David, it really is true that all of this attention really changes how you view this, or how you approach this material. And in some ways it's like, when you see all this hype, for Heroes in Crisis started at San Diego with this weird boat cruise that was like a cult meeting.
Yeah, that was
All
very
like
strange.
it was, right? And then after months and months and months, you finally get this little 32-page pamphlet, and you're like, is that all there is?
Yeah.
Is that all there is? Is that all there is? Yes, it's always a little.
Yo, everybody. I want to take a quick break to talk about my friends at Radio vs. the Martians. Mike Gillis and Casey Doran host the Radio vs. the Martians podcast, a show that gathers their funniest, smartest friends once a month for a deep dive into science fiction, video games, horror, comics, movies, and everything in between. So far, they've dissected topics like Superman, Steven Spielberg, Akira, George Lucas, zombies, Twin Peaks, Hayao Miyazaki, James Bond, Watchmen, and whether drivers are required to pull over for the Ghostbusters. Find this podcast and its spin-off show, Podcast La Vista, baby, a celebration of the films of thespian and statesman Arnold Schwarzenegger, on iTunes, Stitcher, and RadioVersusTheMartians.com. And now, back to the show. I'm kind of shocked that they were hanging their hat on a comic that was effectively like a comic that was dealing with PTSD in the DC universe. Like, I find it hard to imagine that they really projected that out to be this immense seller. I mean, like, I thought it was going to be an interesting comic because Tom King is interesting and Clay Mann is a good artist, and et cetera, et cetera. But I was kind of shocked even to see it as the number 2 seller in the Diamond reports that came out this week. And I mean, I don't know. I didn't expect it to be that big. But can we go back to Bat Penis really quick?
Mm-hmm, sure.
So I want to ask about that.
I know. We really should touch on that.
Oh God. I
can't resist.
Do you feel like, I kind of feel, looking at that situation from the outside, that it would have been a problem that blew over, or like it was a joke. It would have been a joke that blew over in 24 hours if DC didn't shut down further prints and wiped it from digital and everything like that. I kind of feel like it was a problem they created themselves. How do you feel about that?
I think that there was, the DC has a new boss. Pam Lifford. Yeah, Pamela Lifford, and she didn't like the bat penis. So I
don't
feel
blame
like
her.
this. Yeah, so I don't think it was not. I mean, maybe it would have escaped her notion, her notice if they had just been, not freaked out over it and just been like, haha, I saw your pee-pee, Batman, and just not gotten retailers in such a huff. But it definitely reached. Everybody heard about it. Everyone heard about it, and so by that time it was, or the genie was out of the bottle.
Yep.
So no, I don't think. I mean, I think it's ridiculous that that this created such a hubbub. We had like topless Harley Quinn, and nobody cares about that because women are often seen naked. Nobody is afraid of a naked. I mean, nobody really is afraid of a naked woman. Well, that's not true, but anyway. Whereas the idea of, a naked superhero male is very scary and challenging and troubling. So, I mean, there's a lot to be said from a behavioral psychology about this.
Yeah, it's really weird. And just the fact it's Batman. I mean, like, that's their most precious intellectual property, and the fact that they're exposing him. I don't know. I mean, I kind of wonder what you expect when you're hiring Brian Azzarello and Lee Bermejo to do a like adult Batman comic. Like, what do you expect them to do? Like, that's kind of, I mean, like, didn't editorial know about this beforehand? It's all very odd to me.
It is. And, I'll say the book looks beautiful. I love Bermejo's style. He's absolutely stunning art on every page. I wrote about this on the beat a little bit, but I'll say it again. Black Label was created because sales execs at DC looked at their top sellers, and month after month, it's Watchmen and Dark Knight and the Killing Joke.
Yep.
So all these books that came out in the 50s and in the 80s. And you wonder, why can't I have another perennial seller? And you just can't create lightning in a bottle. The new perennial seller from DC had its new Watchmen. It was called DC Superhero Girls. It's one of their best-selling graphic novels of all times, I was told. And that book did sell an insane amount. And, you need to... Nothing can be a revolution twice,
right.
From an ideological revolution twice. Okay. What comes after postmodernism, So, by trying to recreate the wonder and social excitement, just the excitement when Watchmen and Dark Knight came out 30 years later is impossible, and nor should you try, But so I think on the surface of it, you look at Watchmen, and you're like, oh, Dr. Manhattan was naked, and that was awesome. So let's Batman naked, But the whole point of it in Watchmen was that, he had become more than human, and so being naked had absolutely no meaning anymore. Right. And, the idea in Batman Damned is nowhere near as sophisticated as that. Sorry. And, let me put it, he gets a lot of heat, but I will say if Frank Miller had made Batman naked, it would have mattered, even the Frank Miller of today.
Yeah.
The Frank Miller of today would understand what he was dealing with here. And there's very few creators who get this side of this. And, I have nothing but respect for Brian and Lee Bermejo, Brian Azzarello and Lee Bermejo, because they are, they've written some great comics, drawn some great comics. It's a beautiful book. But, they had a tiger by the tail, and they just didn't know. They were playing with fire, and it burned down the house.
Yeah. No, it is interesting. I think Black Label is still a good idea. Like, the idea of trying, like, not necessarily trying to recreate the magic, but the idea of trying to build simultaneously for the retail market and the book market in the way that they're doing, I think is smart. But at the same time, like what you were saying with DC superhero girls is true. I mean, I did want to bring up one of the new things that came out of New York Comic Con, at least to a degree, was the fact that 2019 will be the rare double Raina Telgemeier year. And the fact we're going to have both Share Your Smile, which is her book that's going to teach people, kids, how to make their own, share their own stories, and then also Guts, which is another autobio comic. Like from an overarching industry standpoint, how do you feel like that will impact the larger market? Because I feel like part of the reason why the graphic novel side has been down the last couple of years is almost straight up like a lack of Raina Telgemeier. And having 2 books, I think, will be immense.
So I'm not sure how much Raina's books actually impacted the direct sales market. Certainly created a lot of excitement in the book market, so that's fantastic. And but listen, I don't mean to dethrone Queen Raina, but there's a bunch of folks in her retinue now, and that's great. There need to be, it can't be the entire industry that rests on her shoulders because, she took a year off from doing books.
Oh, it's understandable.
Because yeah, because she had some personal stuff going on, and that that was actually did impact the book market quite a bit, and so but Dave Pilkey's books are doing really well.
3 million,
and
3 million.
Yeah,
that's insane.
Yeah, Nate Powell continue, or not excuse me, not Nate Powell. Lincoln Pierce continues to do well with Big Nate books. And obviously Wimpy Kid and Dork Diaries, which aren't really graphic novels, but, are created by cartoonists. Those continue to be exemplary. So, we have a whole category now, which is why one of the big things that happened this year was Barnes & Noble created a kids comics section. So, that was huge.
I have to say, so I actually went to Barnes & Noble recently to buy Amulet Volume 8 because I love Kazuo Kibuishi. And it was really great because I went there and I was saying, oh, I'm looking for the latest Amulet book. And the person, instead of having to go to their computer like they almost always have to do, took me to it immediately and then was telling me all these different thoughts that she had about it and about the fact she was like,
wow.
It was funny when I was looking at the cover, I was like, it's like a supernova. And then she said that she was talking to her coworker and she's like, well, that's the name of the book. And she's like, I felt like an idiot. And I love the fact that like, the majority of the time when I go to Barnes & Noble, if I ask them about the book or any book, they have to look up the computer, route me over. But instead, this is one that's actually generating conversation amongst them. And they weren't even the people who were working in the kids' graphic novel section. They just happened to be somebody that I came across in the store. And I don't know. I mean, I think it obviously Anchorage, Alaska is not a microcosm for everywhere. But I do think that says something that's something that they're getting a lot of questions about.
Right, it does, and that's a great anecdote. That's a really great anecdote that shows, some of the development that we're having. And hi, can you hear me still?
I can.
Okay. Yeah, we're having a lot of tech issues here at Stately Beat Manor. But yeah, and Amulet's another one. Amulet's a fantastic series, and that one's interesting because Kazu's been working on it for what, like a long time, like 13 years, 12 years, something like that, and. He's kind of, he's even talked about how hard it is for him to end this series. Just doing the final book is very taxing for him to actually finish it up. So,
he's got a lot to cover.
He does. And so, but it's interesting that this category has been around for more than a decade, and absolutely Raina is the queen, all hail the queen. But she is, it's a strong court of courtiers and ladies in waiting and gentlemen at arms who are coming with her to sail this category.
Yeah, I certainly think that the time since Ghosts has underlined the fact that there's a lot more depth than people would give it credit for. Because
right.
Even just since September, we had Faith Erin Hicks had a book and it was great. And she has like a legion of books coming out in the next year that will be serving the book market with like her Legend of Korra book. And she also has Pumpkinheads coming out with Rainbow Roll. And then like Kazu's one came out, and then Dav Pilkey's got the new Dogman book coming out. And I don't know. I just think that there's a lot more depth and there's a lot of really interesting voices coming up. Like I really loved The Prince and the Dressmaker from Jen Wang this year.
I was just going to say that book. I was just going to mention it.
Yeah, like a lot of the first second stuff, the people that they're kind of building up, I'm really excited about.
Right, absolutely. And first second, of course, is the engine that has driven a lot of this. I mean, they have been going and really putting out quality books for more than a decade and, winning awards and just really on top of it. I mean, Adventure Zone,
Hmm.
I mean, I don't know how much they paid for that, but, I mean, it's huge. It's
Yeah.
huge. It was the number one book when it was announced on Amazon, and it made the New York Times bestseller list. So there's a lot of energy out there. I mean, there's also these books. When I was at New York Comic Con, there was this one at the Go Comics line. There was this one book that was having a signing, and they collect comics from the internet, and it was this Instagram comic, and um, what was the one that everybody always made fun of? Love Always. That one.
I don't know that
The
one.
guy committed suicide eventually.
Oh God.
Oh, it was awful it was in the 80s and the 90s, and it was just the two little naked people who pretended to said homilies all the time, and it was huge. And then the guy killed himself, so it's very ironic and sad and tragic. But anyway, this comic is on Instagram. It has over 1 million followers, and it's really just like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, people like this stuff, whether I like it or not. Not all of the great hits are really amazing books, and but somebody loves it, so it's okay.
Now look at the sensation that is Nancy since Olivia James took over too. I mean, it's like it's been a really interesting year in comics, and like there's been a lot of depth. I mean, I didn't ever expect like a catchphrase from Nancy to become maybe like the biggest comic, like positive comic moment, and but then there is Sluggo is lit. It's huge.
Hmm.
Anyways, but all right, so I have a few more things I want to tackle. I wanted to bring up Friday's big news, which is
Right.
that Chuck Wendig, writer of a variety of Star Wars novels, Star Wars comics, Star Wars, all kinds of stuff, was fired by Marvel. And while the story is certainly developing, it largely seems like it at least came from a Marvel editor that he was out, and it was related to his vulgarity and his political nature on Twitter. It's especially in the reflection of the Chelsea Kane and like the Vision stuff going out. It's certainly a weird time to be a Marvel creator or to be looking at Marvel as a whole. What's your take on the story?
Well, a lot of times when these disasters happen, an alternate, especially when like writers who are come in from outside who have a big following,
Mm-hmm.
okay, like a Roxane Gay or Chelsea Kane or Chuck Wendig, when they're brought in to the mainstream comics fold, and it's almost always Marvel that does it. So,
And they just
you
hired like
know,
the Saska sisters, like these like film directors for Black
right,
Widow. They
right,
do it a
right.
lot.
They do, and they did it with Ta-Nehisi Coates, and I mean it's something they've done for quite a while. They've had success with it, but then quite often it doesn't end well. And Margaret Stoll, she's another one, and she's actually very happy at Marvel, it seems. And but she came from outside comics as well, so they're very big on hiring writers outside comics. And then very often when it ends in tears, comic Twitter will rise up uh, in unison and say, how terrible it is that what Marvel did, and it might very well be terrible. I'm not trying to say it wasn't terrible. And then, like Marvel, from inside Marvel, I will hear these stories about the reason it didn't work was because they never turned in their work, or it was unusable, or like these kind of discrediting stories come floating in. So they're going to have a hard time doing that with Wendig because he's been around comics for quite a while,
Hmm.
and they worked with him for quite a while. And he certainly knows Star Wars, which is what he's working on because he's written a bunch of best-selling Star Wars novels. And, I haven't had a chance to really dig into this story yet, but it really looks bad for Marvel. It really seems like they really screwed the pooch.
Yeah, there's not. I mean, honestly, there's not a lot to dig into just because it's pretty much just Wendig and like the very little that has come out from Marvel, which has been like through requests for information from people like Abraham Reisman and other people. They're not really commenting on it. The thing I'm like of two minds about this. On one hand, like my day job is like in an advertising agency in social media, and I 100. I mean, like reading his tweets. I totally understand why a company wouldn't want to be associated with that because frankly like it was intense, like it was like
Hmm.
even no matter how you feel about any of the subject matter, it was intense language for a marketplace that does involve like children or like people of a variety of I don't know, varieties.
Right.
But the
Well,
thing,
anytime you use any kind of prolapsed body part as an insult, you're really, going over the line.
yeah. So that's on one hand. The other hand about it is the other part for me is I find it really, the reason why it's weird from an optics standpoint from Marvel is this should not be a secret. This is who Chuck Wendig is. He tweets about this, like
Right.
he gets mad online fairly regularly in my experience. I don't follow him, but he's come up in my feed enough, and it's mostly for things like this. And so I guess I wasn't surprised by it, and the fact that they were makes them seem like they're bad at like figuring out who they're hiring. And like, I don't know, it just seems like, why would you announce it New York Comic Con and then this changes everything? Like, this shouldn't have been news. So from an optics standpoint, it kind of makes them seem like they're bad at planning. Same thing with the Chelsea Kane and the Vision stuff. Like,
Right.
why announce that book if you have other plans for the Vision? You didn't have those plans when they were making the 4 issues that were already done. I mean, I find it all kind of makes Marvel seem like they don't really know what they're doing, and they're not doing much to control the narrative to show that that they actually do know what they're doing. It's a
Right.
weird handling of all of this by Marvel.
Well, Marvel is a really bad spot. And what really makes all of this, a bad spot, except for the fact that they're the number one comics publisher and the Marvel Cinematic Universe is the number one movie serial of all times. Um, but however, that said, what makes this all look very suspicious is that, Chelsea Kane was obviously targeted by the same kind of bigoted trolls that that have been targeting everybody in comics for quite a while, and she didn't like it and she left, and then they brought her back, and then they fired her over it. Now the mysteries for that, like I said, the story coming from Marvel is that the book wasn't usable, so which still kind of defies credulity for me. With Wendig, the situation, obviously he was fighting with right-wing trolls,
Hmm.
and he's quite liberal, and Marvel is owned by Ike Perlmutter, who is in Donald Trump's administration, just about. He's one of his closest advisors. They're besties. Perlmutter is actually running the VA, which I thought meant that he wouldn't have time to mess around with Marvel. Perlmutter's a very, very problematic person who has left a mark on Marvel that's really indelible, and it's very bad. It's still very cheap there. I think they still have only one pot of coffee a day or something like that.
At Marvel?
They have the one. They have the one bathroom. Their office is incredibly cramped and tiny and awful. And I mean, you don't hear these stories though because Marvel is very solid. There's a lot of solidarity among the people who work there, and they have way more of a They have a bunker mentality. Period.
Hmm.
They don't have a PR person who's forward facing. I mean, that used to be Agent M, and he's kind of caught in his own stuff going on, and so, they're kind of, it looks bad. I don't care what the real story is, quote unquote, real story. I mean,
It's optics.
firing yeah, the optics of this are horrible. And, at the same time, a lot of people are lumping Wendig in with James Gunn, who got fired off of the, Guardians of the Galaxy movies for his bad tweets, which were raised by a right wing, alt-right activist. And, so the alt-right got James Gunn fired for things that he said 10 years ago. So that's pretty chilling. Now Wendig is being fired for things that he said a couple of weeks ago. And I tell you, David, though, what's so ironic is that, some people are like, oh, it's just like James Gunn, and they're kind of showing solidarity with James Gunn. But I'll tell you, I saw lots of people when he got fired saying, good riddance, he should never have said those things. And, so I mean, it's a circle. Time is not a flat circle, but Twitter is. And, at the far end of this, there's really no difference between people who think they're on the alt right or the alt left. It's a horrible fucking mess.
Yeah.
And I mean, Twitter is bad. It's evil. It's destroying. It's destroying our societies.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could a lot of it. I mean, like social media too, like Facebook. Like I said, my job is in social media, so like I go on there and it's a war zone quite often, and I just have no. I've actually
Mhm.
apologies to friends or family who are listening to this, but I have unfollowed almost every single person that I am friends with on Facebook because I'm like, I don't go on there generally, but when I go on there, I don't like going on there and just seeing like horrible stuff all the time. And on Twitter, I'm like very, very, like, I curate who I follow really tightly. Like on my personal one, I only follow 150 people at a time, and on Sketched, I only follow 300 people. And it's kind of like a weird thing I do, but it's also just kind of like a mental health thing. I try to protect myself from all of it because it can get really ugly. But I think part of it's just like people get so immersed in it. And I don't know. I mean, like comics, the Comicsgate people, I don't understand what their lives are. I know that's like a really like weird thing to say maybe, but like their lives are like being unrelenting pushers of these like fictional narratives that are just absolutely asinine. Like, what are their lives like? It's so bizarre to me. And I don't know. I mean, like, I think the whole Wendig thing is like, people are acting like it's it is a big deal. I'm not going to, downplay it or anything like that, but I kind of feel like this stuff will probably only happen more, and it won't just be at Marvel.
Absolutely. And, I mean, I think one of the things that comics Twitter is angriest about is that people like Dan Slott and Mark Waid are still being employed by Marvel and, who are also seen as bad actors, although Slott is off Twitter, and Waid
Right.
comes and goes off Twitter, on and off Twitter. And, that they're continuing. But I mean, it's like they just get these, I mean, on both sides, it's like people become obsessed with one bad transgression, and it's like, oh, in personal life, well, I can do this, but on Twitter, I must always be correct or whatever. I mean, I don't know. I have a lot of sympathy for human beings and their infinite diversity and infinite struggle, And so, I'm a very forgiving person most of the time, but I mean, like talk about Facebook and Twitter. I mean, these are big corporations, and Facebook has very successfully monetized people fighting with each other, fighting with your family members. So that's brilliant. Like probably the most brilliant thing in human history is to monetize family fights. And
it's an endless
Twitter
resource.
Yeah, and Twitter is not able to monetize these things. But, it's also like when social media first started, maybe people had some little pretense of being polite on there. And, now it's like you just come out guns blazing because you're going to get, it's like Battle Royale, really. It's all, no wonder Fortnite's so popular, And it's kill or be killed. That's how social media is. It's kill or be killed. And you asked what do these people do? I mean, look, there have been trolls on the internet since there was an internet.
I know.
I know, but this is the thing. It's no different. We did not invent the wheel here. It's like there have always been sad, dangerous people, or not dangerous, but sad, aggressive people who attack all the time. And they, the bigger the platform, the more people could see them. And they're very quiet people. I guarantee most of them will not say any of this in real life, in person, and they sit very quietly and go home, and this is where they unload, and this is where they live their life. And so, I mean, I need to go back and read some of my dystopian comics and science fiction to see where this is all going to end, because it's a big mess.
Man, it's got to be exhausting. Like I try really hard to be polite, and I on Twitter, and I don't think. I mean, it's not that hard. I have a general rule of, generally speaking, if I ask myself, should I tweet this? I don't tweet it. Like, if the question is in my mind, I just don't do it. But at the same time, not everybody does that. Because that's just not the way it is. But I don't know. The whole thing seems really exhausting to me. And I will be interested to see if Marvel actually ends up saying something more about the Wendig stuff, because the optics are really bad. And like the control of the narrative is clearly on Chuck's side, understandably, because he was the one who brought it up. But I do think a lot of times all these discussions online make me kind of wonder how much people understand this stuff, because I saw some people trying to push the idea that this was Marvel burying the story by like releasing it on a Friday afternoon. Marvel didn't want that story out. I guarantee you that they weren't like, hey, Chuck, we're going to tell you on Friday, so you'll make sure you tweet it now so we, people forget it over the weekend. They didn't want this out. They didn't want the Chelsea Kane stuff out. Like, this came out because Chuck Wendig and Chelsea Kane can say these things because they have other flows of income besides Marvel.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
so it's just like, I don't know, whenever I see this stuff and I see like the comic skaters talking about like how, sales are dying. Also, we want to save Marvel, but we're going to tell you constantly about how they're dying. I mean, like, I feel like these people are very disingenuous in the way that they approach all of it, and it's very odd to me.
Right. Right. It is. I mean, I think everybody dumps on Marvel for all the things, and they certainly have a lot of bad optics. But some of it is just optics. Some of it is not like it's just, anything can be made a scandal. And they have hired a lot of people like Ta-Nehisi Coates and made a success out of it. So I mean, this is that, like we said earlier, this is how they've been doing business for the last while, and it's perilous, but now it's quite perilous, And if I think is it Chuck Wendig writing a book for Dynamite? I think
I
he
don't
is.
know.
I
Honestly, here's
think,
the funny thing: I've never read anything he's ever written in
yeah, me
any
neither.
capacity.
Yeah, me neither. But let me see. I think that he actually was writing something for Dynamite, and that would be really funny. We'll go ask Dynamite. I'm sorry, people. I'm Googling
I just
while
want to
we
say really
talk.
quick, I got to give Coates a lot of credit because he has really figured out the comic book medium. Like, his stuff is really
He
good right
has.
now. He's like, at first I was a little dubious. I was like, oh boy, I don't know about this, writer outside of comics coming in. I'm not feeling this. But his current Black Panther and Captain America stuff is really good.
Right, right. Yeah, absolutely. You know what? Chuck Wendig wrote a Turok series for Dynamite.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, he wrote the yeah, Turok for them. Turok, Son of Stone, classic. So, this guy's been writing comics for quite a while, and so obviously it wasn't his first rodeo, but it certainly was the angriest rodeo.
Certainly, yeah. Yo, everybody. I want to take a second to talk about my friends over at Ahoy Comics. They're looking to shake up the publishing industry with a bold new format: comic book magazines. What are those? Comic book magazines will feature traditional, full-length comic stories, plus extra material like prose fiction from Grant Morrison, cartoons from Shannon Wheeler, and more. And Ahoy begins its second wave of comics with 2 titles. First is Captain Ginger, a 4-issue miniseries from Stuart Moore and June Brigman about a future where humanity has died out, but one gang of felines and their leader, Captain Ginger, struggle in a hostile universe after managing to escape the Earth. Also in October is a new 6-issue mature readers anthology miniseries, Edgar Allan Poe's Snifter of Terror, as creators like Mark Russell, Tom Payer, and Fred Harper tell stories that are a cross between drunk history and tales from the crypt. Look for those in October in comic shops everywhere. And now, let's get back to the show. So, I just have a few more questions. First off, before we move on from Marvel, what are you hearing about Marvel in the CB Cebulski era besides obviously this stuff? Like, how do you feel like it's going as an outsider that has inside knowledge?
Well, it's interesting because this actually came up in some of the little haunts of the internet where I hang out, little internet bars, and it was like, wow, what a loser Cebulski is, and I don't think that's quite true either. I think that there was a lot of internal struggle during the Axel Alonso era, and everybody said Axel needs to go.
Mm-hmm.
People have been saying that for a year, and since Cebulski has come in, Marvel sales have stabilized, and so I don't think you could entirely give him non-credit for that, So I think the things that Cebulski has done are actually not visible to outsiders. I think it's more like a stabilizing influence. And Joe Quesada has come back and been much more visible face of the company, and that was sort of a emergency mission. And he's even taking on the Comicsgate people, and from what I hear, he's going to keep on doing that. So, so I think the things that are positive for Marvel about the Cebulski era are not all that visible. And, some of them are throwbacks, like they're doing a new Marvel Knights line, but, why not? I mean, see, and with Marvel Knights, I got to be honest, I think they did it the right way. Instead of hiring some, veterans, comics veterans. I mean, granted, I'm not saying don't hire veterans, okay, because there's a horrible ageism issue in this industry, absolutely,
Sure.
no question about it. But they've hired some younger writers, more diverse writers, and say, hey, you know what? Have fun, take a crack at this. You've got nothing to lose, and that's what you need. You need these fresh viewpoints. I think Alan Moore was, I guess he was like in his 30s
Hmm.
when he wrote Watchmen. I mean, he certainly wasn't fresh out of school, but he was relatively young. And Sandman, I think Neil might have been in his 20s when he did that,
Hmm.
when he started Sandman. And a lot of these writers were very young when they did these seminal works. And these creators were definitely below 40. On the other hand, I love pointing out Stan and Jack were over 40 when they did the Marvel Universe,
Yeah.
they were, I think Stan was 39 and Jack Kirby was like in his very early 40s. And they were, I mean, talk about veteran, they'd done everything already. And then they were able to reinvent things in a way that was absolutely seismic, you
Hmm.
know? So, I mean, age really doesn't matter. It's the attitude that matters. And Stan and Jack absolutely had a fresh attitude about things. And if you really want to reinvent things or shake things up, you got to find people who have a fresh attitude, and which probably isn't me. I've been saying these things for so long.
I feel like though I agree with you on the Marvel Knights thing because like getting bringing on Donny Cates and Vita Ayala and Teenie Howard and Matthew Rosenberg is like, I don't know, it brings some exciting energy to it. And also the fact that they were fans of the original Marvel Knights is kind of a cool thing to see kind of come back. But I also, one thing that I said when Bendis went to DC was I was hoping that Marvel would empower more of their younger creators to like fill some of the power or some of the vacuum because like Bendis had eaten up so much real estate with Marvel for
Right.
so long that there weren't a lot of opportunities for growth amongst creators that were a bit newer. And so we've seen Cates really like, I mean, Cates has really blown up this year. I mean, it's been kind of astonishing seeing him going from, I mean, he's kind of like, I don't want to say the new Tom King because they're obviously way different flavors, but he's like the hottest thing since new Tom King.
Mm. Right,
And
right, right.
I think that's a really good thing. And I think largely it can be hard to determine who did what at a publisher and how much was CB. But considering how bad his start was with the Akira Yoshida stuff, Fresh Start has been good. Fresh Start, like qualitatively, has been one of Marvel's best reboots that they've ever done. I think the Fantastic Four stuff has been really bad,
Hmm.
but I think that qualitatively it's been good and they've stabilized. And I think those are good things. So it seems like it's going well, but I don't have that much inside knowledge on what is or isn't CB's influence. I have heard that like Joe Q is definitely a lot more involved on the publishing side than we really think,
Hmm.
but I don't know. I mean, it seems like it's going well, and that reflects well upon CB, I guess.
Right, right, right. Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, these things with Wendig and Chelsea Kane are really bad, you know, and for at least from optics and also just from,
Talent
free
standpoint.
from a talent standpoint, and so that's a problem, whatever. Is it Ike? It could be. I don't know. Ike's a really sinister person, a very shadowy, sinister person. So I would not put anything past Ike at this point. But whatever it is, Marvel does need to clean up that side of their house. They need to not have these terrible blow ups. And listen, I know the editor who spoke to Wendig, and he's a lovely person. And I'm sorry that he's getting dragged through all this, but maybe you weren't the best messenger.
Right. Yeah. I do think it's funny. I'm not saying that you're wrong about Ike's influence, but I do think it's funny anytime something kind of clandestine happens at Marvel, people are like attribute it to Ike. I don't know. Like you said, he's running the VA. Like, I kind of wonder how much influence he really has on a day to day basis at Marvel. It's entirely possible that he is completely behind this, but I'd be interested. That would be one of those things that I'd love to be a fly on the wall. Just be like, what does he do there?
Well, it varies, okay? And I mean, he does live in Florida where he has all these lawsuits against his neighbors, but I am told that after the Disney sale, he kind of was not around a lot, and then all of a sudden he started showing up quite a bit more. But I mean, this is 10 years ago, and he had quite a bit of influence. I do not underestimate Ike. I do not underestimate him running things on a day-to-day basis. If you're a wrestling fan, you got a big feud brewing here, okay? Which is that Pamela Lifford, who works at Warner Brothers now, formerly worked at Disney, and she was actually like, so when Ike the whole Disney Marvel deal went down, I got a very big influence in consumer products because he owned a toy company and he's one of the biggest shareholders. And something that I'm told that Bob Iger regrets greatly. But and he fired Pam Lifford. Okay.
Hmm.
And she is a woman, an African American woman. And of her and two other employees were also let go, sued for discrimination, and actually, was settled. So, there is quite a bit, like Pam Lifford and Ike actually have a history. So this could be a big blood feud coming up.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to watch because I don't know. I feel like we're already feeling her impact at DC, but it'll be interesting because I think sometimes anytime there's a change of power, people wonder how it's going to impact the comic product. But especially given what you just said, I wouldn't be surprised if like she's going to really push it in significant ways. But
Right.
okay, so I just have one more question. I want to talk about last year when you came on. It was like peak doom and gloom. There was like a lot of articles about like, oh, like everything's going poorly, sales down, yada yada yada. 2018 has largely seemed, if not to be a gain year, it's been like a stabilization year.
Right.
What
Absolutely.
is that? What kind of what you're feeling about the industry right now?
I do, and I mean, I think you do have to give it. You have to give some credit to CB Cebulski,
Hmm.
or at least Marvel's new regime. Joe Q and CB, and Marvel stabilized, and they got a lot of Marvel got a lot of shit last year for their anti-diversity comments, and which, if you noticed, were really I just don't believe that the people on the ground at Marvel are anti-diversity. I really don't. And I that's because the ones that I know really are passionate about that. I know Axel was actually very pro-diversity. There's a bunch of people up there who are in minorities who you wouldn't know necessarily.
Well,
And
I mean, same with David Gabriel. I think people attribute a lot of stuff to him that I mean, he was the one who said that line, but at the same
yeah,
time, I don't. I think contextually, it would have made a lot more sense. I'm not defending the stance, but at the same time, I think contextually, it probably would have made more sense.
absolutely. But it's also like, if it was a trollish statement, and I think that he just had no idea how to speak in public.
Sure.
Because you never should have said that. But what he was saying was that retailers didn't like it. Okay, and retailers don't like didn't some retailers didn't like it. And then last year at New York Comic Con, you had the bigoted Santa Claus incident where this guy got up and said he didn't want the gays and he didn't
Oh,
like
right.
Iceman. So obviously retailers are, a lot of retailers are conservative,
Hmm.
okay, or Republican, and or lean that way. And there's certainly, in fact, I can think of 4 or 5 prominent retailers right off the tip of, like
Yeah.
right off, who are conservative and not shy about it. Okay. And so, I think he was reflecting an unfortunate reality. And, I think Marvel has stuck with it. I just don't understand. Oh, we never protect our marginalized creators. It's like, well, Chuck Wendig isn't marginalized. He's a straight cis white man. Okay. And so, I mean, I just want to point out they haven't always protected their cis white het, you know, uh, writers either. And they keep hiring people like Vita Ayala and, Mags Visaggio and so on, Teenie Howard, and I mean, so they keep hiring women and people of color. So and then it ends badly, but I mean, they keep doing it. So,
This is quite the
I
circle.
right, I just don't see why they don't get credit for doing that. And then I called one of journalists out on this one time, and he was like, "Oh, that's just how it should be." And I was like, "Right. So if you don't do it, you get dragged to hell. But if you do it, so should you don't get any praise because you should have done it in the first place." So it's like, there's no reward there.
Right.
You're damned if you do, and you're damned if you don't. And so, again, this is just part of this social media. And listen, there's right and wrong. I still believe in right and wrong in the world. And but on Twitter, it's just wrong. There's no
Hmm.
right, you know? And so, yes, I think things have stabilized quite a bit, and a lot of this is unfortunately it. Marvel got rid of all their legacy heroes at the same time, and that created a pretty weak line.
Right.
Okay. And so they've brought back their legacy heroes, and it's a stronger line. And and at the same time, I haven't mentioned Eve Ewing. That's who I was kept thinking. They hired Eve Ewing, who is a academic, a poet, and a woman of color from Chicago. She's going to write a uh
Ironheart.
miniseries and Ironheart. And guess what? That's exactly what you should be doing.
Hmm.
That's fantastic. And so Marvel has not necessarily abandoned all the diverse new versions of their characters. They're just kind of, bringing them. I mean, Miles Morales is huge in the MCU, and they have the whole movie coming out.
Oh yeah.
So doing that movie, and they're really pushing that. So
And they had the video game, which was a like monster hit. Monster
ab
hit.
absolutely. So, I think there are signs of hope. Just I'm sure we had some kind of big overarching comment on this last year too, but the bigger problem is that the world is going to shit.
Yeah.
And we're facing ecological holocaust that's going to change. Luckily, I'll be dead probably by the time the worst parts of it happen. But I just went to a baby shower yesterday. I hope my little cousin Ned is up for it because he's going to have quite an interesting life, I feel. And but he's ready,
Mhm.
and Ned to be. But I don't understand how we have an incredibly unstable government right now, not just in America, but everywhere.
Mhm.
I mean, they can't even do Brexit.
Mhm.
Like it's so hard to do, and all of this alt-right clashes here, there, everywhere, and the world economy has stayed really stable.
Mhm.
And aside from this big stock market crash, so we'll see what happens tomorrow. We're talking on a Sunday. We'll see what happens tomorrow. So I feel like comics are part of this really strong economy that we have right now. But I mean, I'm not an economist, and I'm not sure what the next phase in all this is with all this instability. So, it might be like, all those big David Lean movies that they used to make. We might just be little tiny people buffeted about by the winds of time and history.
I do kind of feel like times of uncertainty do kind of lead towards like more stable economies in weird ways. But I do the weird thing is, so looking at the comic industry as a whole, I do think it's stabilized quite a bit. But I do think that there is, God, this is such a dramatic word, but like there's a reckoning coming. There are so many books and there's so many publishers, and I do think that you have periods of boom and I think you have periods of bust. And like I think that there's the potential that there could be some like publisher losses or imprint losses,
Hmm.
and maybe like it's consolidation to the point where comics are at the right place that they should be, and we wouldn't really see too much loss in terms of how the book market does and how the direct market does, because frankly like there might just be too much volume right now.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and and I'll be interested to see how that is, because like I look at some of these publishers and I look at these press releases I get and I'm like, this sounds great. Who are you selling this to?
Right.
And how is this going to sell? And I know that's a terrible way to look at it and it's kind of anti-art, but at the same time it's like comics are at the intersection of commerce and art, and it's tricky. And I do think that there's a lot of cool stuff going on outside of like just book market
Hmm.
and direct market in terms of like web comics and stuff that's being kickstarted and everything like that.
Hmm.
And I'll be interested to see how that goes. But I do think that there's gonna have to be some level of consolidation in the next couple of years, and people might go doom and gloom again about that. But I think that's more like the record getting set straight.
Yeah. Well, I agree. And there is. You mentioned Kickstarter. I mean, there's still huge Kickstarter success stories, and people will go direct to the creator now.
Sure.
There's no stigma against that. And at New York Comic Con, maybe this is a symbol. New York Comic Con has the best artist alley. And they fixed it up. It had wide aisles. It wasn't quite as awesome as it was when it was over in the shed that they tore down, but it was still it was really good. You know, and as I walked around the regular show floor, which granted I didn't do too much, but I would, I only would see lines or people gathered for signings if there was a huge name like a Robert Kirkman or a Frank Miller, and I mean I would see some big names at some big publishers just kind of sitting there and not too much going on, and But if that person went to Artist Alley, they were busy all the time, you know? So people really feel no need to go to the publisher's booth and get a signature when they can go to the Artist Alley and have, I guess, a more authentic experience. So, that's something that, publishers really need to prove justify their existence in that way. Obviously they pay creators and make it easier for those who want to just kind of sit back and cash a check, and which is nothing wrong with. You collecting your money shouldn't be necessarily be part of your job. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I said it would be a big year of change. I'm really glad that I got to go travel so much, go to Seattle, go to Angoulême, go to ALA in New Orleans, and
that's
I
a
got
nice
to
mix.
yeah, I got to see a lot of I've been to the four corners of the United States, really, and I've seen a lot of stuff, and it was definitely a year of change, and I got to see some of that happening in front of me. And yeah, I mean, if I can predict one thing, though, it's that there will be more before there will be less. We're going to
Yes.
see more of all of this, and then eventually it's going to settle into a couple channels, and there will eventually be the stronger channel. And how that shakes out with bookstores and Amazon and online, unknown, undetermined, more to come.
All right. Well, until next year, Heidi, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate
Of
you taking the
course.
time.
All right, David, I really appreciate talking to you, and take care.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with comics journalist Heidi MacDonald. You can find her on Twitter at @ComicsAce, her site, The Beat, on Twitter at @ComicsBeat, and The Beat at comicsbeat.com. If you're a fan of Off Panel, make sure to check it out on Patreon. If you back the show on there, you not only support the show, but you get early access to each week's podcast, access to exclusive written and audio content, and more. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the show on iTunes or Stitcher and give the show a rating or review while you're at it. You can find the show on social media by liking the show on Facebook at /sketched, that's SKTECHD, followed on Twitter at SketchComic, or following me at @SliceFriedGold. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Dave Slusher, Kieran Mark Antonio, WMQ Comics, Akil, Greg Lockhart, Kokachi, Phil White, Ben Becker, Sean Pinello, Ken Heidelman, Philip Sevi, Al Ewing, Ryan Alcock, Nick Michelin, David Kelly, Robert Wilson IV, Nick Paletto, Dylan Campbell, Owen McCready, Brendan Fletcher, Michael Garland, Gary Maloney, Jonathan Nilsson, Matthew Groom, Jason Nassy, Mike Gillis, Adam Bogert, Xavier Files, Maria Schweitzer, Matthew Taylor, Tyler Turner, Dan Guarino, Nick Patera, Jacob Sorelli, Ford Gilmore, David Baraldi, Evan Blazer, Brian McRae, Ira James Udaskin, Henning Allers, Modern Magic Stories, Nick Hall, Bruno Batista, Bobby Angus, Bjorn Basin, John Hendrick, Steve Anderson, Phil Nall, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Benjamin Chipper, Colin McMahon, Chris Palmer, Maxwell Schmidt, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Lou Avino, Nicholas Kesslake, Greg Rucka, Ryan Mail, Adam Highfill, Nicholas Gardner, Andrew Corrigan, Fiona Staples, Chris Morris, Chris O'Halloran, Mark Abnett, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim DiMonacos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. A quick thanks to the band Wolfpack, whose excellent track outro from their album Volmilch opens and closes the show. Give them a listen as they're totally rad. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.